looking at when people are buying a home or they're in a home for a number of years, and what they're finding is that it's costing more and more money to heat it, or just that they feel like the money is literally running out the door with drafts, or, I suppose different elements that they just think, I could do something about this and I really need to fix it. Like, what are the options?
The BER rating on a house is a good starting point as an indicator. It's a fairly standardized method of comparing one house to another in terms of the energy usage. With the bottom of the scale, you have a G-rated house right up to the top of the scale, which is an A1 rated house. Any improvement can have some or will have some impact on improving the BER rating. So even small things can make a difference. However, in terms of combating the overall energy efficiency of house and making a big difference on its BER rating, the better approach is a combination of measures and selecting the right measures to implement.
And when you look at retrofitting, what are the kind of things you can actually do?
Very simple things like even changing your light bulbs to LED light bulbs will have some impact. It's a small impact, but it's a low cost as well. The other simple, straightforward measures that can have more significant impact on your energy usage would be making sure that your attic insulation is up to current standard. It has a good impact in terms of improving your energy rating, but it's certainly not the most expensive option to
And
go
in
with.
terms of attic insulation, is that something that people are even aware of, really? When they move into a house, is it something they consider, or do you find that it just doesn't occur to people?
I guess some people look very carefully at these things, and other people it doesn't occur to them. Current insulation levels, if you are building to current insulation levels or doing an energy retrofit at the moment, you would be looking to bring your attic insulation up to a minimum of 300 millimeters or a foot deep.
Okay.
Whereas if the house was built any more than 10, 15 years ago, the likelihood is that it only has 4 inches or 8 inches or 100 to 200 millimeters of insulation.
A friend of mine was doing up a house, and like that, the insulation was thin. Like, you could see how thin it was.
Yeah, and it does
um,
some insulation types actually collapse over time. So it might have been installed as 4 inches thick, and 20 years later, it might be sitting and flattened down to about 2 inches deep. And it does have a reduced insulation value when that happens.
in terms of changing the energy rating, I mean, how long does that take? I mean, how many things would you have to achieve for a typical, I suppose, three-bed house, say?
Yes, a typical three-bed, let's say a typical three-bed end of terrace house built, say, from 2000 onward, you could have a pretty good impact on its building energy rating by making sure that the walls are insulated. So if they're cavity walls, they can be pumped with a bonded bead insulation. The attic insulation can easily be topped up. If the house is, and the windows and doors in the house are 20, 25 years old, then replacing those can have a very big impact on the energy rate as well. So they're all things that help make building itself more efficient by wrapping it better. If you think about, walking outside on a cold day, put a hat on, but you also put a jacket on, you might put a pair of boots on. All of those different elements add to the overall comfort and keeping that heat in. And the same is true of a house. You can do it in bits. You might just do the attic insulation like just sticking on a hat, but it'll help, but it's not going to make it a very comfortable house overall without combating all of the other elements also.
That's a great analogy, actually, because looking at cost, then, is there any way of estimating how much someone, I mean, I suppose it's how long is a piece of string in some ways. You could spend as little or as much as you want, really, is it?
There are a lot of variables. The size of a house is going to impact on cost, the type of house or the type of construction when it was built. So, like I say, if you can have a decent impact on your wall insulation by pumping a cavity, then that's a pretty low cost way of getting a good improvement. However, if you don't have cavity walls, if the house is a 1930s to 1950s mass concrete wall, well then cavity wall insulation isn't an option. So you need to look at either internal insulation or external wall insulation, both of which are more expensive than cavity wall insulation. So those things, the type of construction, will impact on the cost as well. I can give you a rough indication of typical costs for taking a whole house approach,
Okay.
where you address all of the main elements, and so you're looking at potentially doing walls, roof, windows and doors, maybe floors in some houses, but not always. Sometimes it's just not a cost-effective route, but sometimes it is. And then after you wrap the house and make it quite warm, if you then switch to a more energy-efficient means of heating, such as the heat pump. So they're typically the types of projects that we would be heavily involved in. Cost ranges on projects like that, taking that whole house approach, could be somewhere between 40,000 and 70,000 before grants, or say 25, as little as 25,000 to 50,000 after grants are availed of. But you could be at either end of that scale, or even a little bit above or a little bit below, depending on the particular house.
And do you find that people are generally aware of the availability of grants for this type of work?
I think they're becoming more aware. I think SEAI have done a very good job in the past of making people aware of single measure grants, where you can get a bit of a grant for doing just attic insulation, or a bit of a grant for just doing the wall insulation. I think they're less aware, but becoming more aware of these whole house grant type option, where, forget about doing the little bits and pieces, forget about just putting on the hat, go at it and tackle all of the elements, and resulting in a very big improvement in the energy efficiency of the house. People are becoming more aware of those grants, and certainly SEAI are doing a lot of work at the moment in trying to get the word out there on larger and more beneficial house type grants.
And for somebody who's made this investment, obviously it will pay back in their own energy savings, but if they wanted to sell on, is it a value that's transferable as well? Would it actually add value to the home?
Yeah, it does. There has been some very good research in the past showing added value to properties based on a simple factor such as the BER rating. I don't have the exact figures to hand, and they're probably a little bit out of date at this stage. But certainly, I mean, if you take your typical semi-detached house, might be valued at 200,000, but it's a G or an F rating, and you sell the house next door instead, which possibly has an A rating. The likelihood is you're going to see 25-30% increase in value potentially. But again, every house is a little bit different, but certainly it adds value.
Of course, yeah.
You can even see that in very general terms. If you take a look across properties, second-hand properties on the market, and look at the asking price for houses which are EF or G rated houses compared to what's being asked for A and B rated houses.
Okay. And in terms of Electric Ireland Superhomes, where do you kind of come in all this?
We come in right from the beginning, and we're there right to the end, if you want to kind of put it in broad terms. So usually the first step with a homeowner getting in touch with us is when they know or they realize they want to do something to improve the energy efficiency of their house, but they're not sure how to go about doing that. They're not even sure what steps they're going to need to take are. So the first step is usually they would get in contact with us. They would fill out an application form, or it's really just an expression of interest form through our website, leaving their contact details and leaving some very basic details about the house. So the type of house, how old the house is, if there's an existing BER rating on it or not, and fairly simple information to start off. And that would then trigger a telephone consultation from one of our retrofit experts, who would, over the space of about an hour, about a half an hour, they'd go through in a little bit more detail information about their house to get a build of a better picture of the house. And from that conversation, the Retrofit Advisor can usually give that homeowner a reasonably good indication of what the likely sensible measures would be, and give them very, very ballpark costs at that stage of what would be involved to get that level of improvement in the house, and also possibly be able to give them an indication of the level of grant available to them. So that's basically a free consultation. At the end of that, they'll have a rough idea of what's possible, what the costs are, and what the grants potentially are.
Okay.
So if at the end of that then they decide they want to go further and they want to put a bit more meat on the bones and kind of get a more accurate picture, at that point they can engage us to do a detailed home survey. So we'd send an engineer out to the house to go through it with a fine-tooth comb and try to establish exactly what they're dealing with, exactly what's there, and from that we can decide what best and most appropriate measures are for that house, and get a cost put on it, and get an accurate grant estimate put on it, and come back to the homeowner with a detailed written energy report of how they can go about doing their energy retrofit.
Okay. And I suppose we all are getting a bit more conscious of our energy usage and, you know, our carbon footprint. So what are the benefits for people who are actually thinking about this and thinking, yes, this is something we need to do. We're wasting money and we're wasting energy, and how do we fix it?
Yeah, so most people kind of think when they're looking at the benefits, they think straight away on the cost savings. And yes, you know, a properly fitted out or a properly upgraded home is going to have a lower running cost. There's also the positive impact on the environment, the reduction in carbon emissions. So a typical house, if you bring a house from a D, E or a G rating up to, say, an A rating, you're probably going to be reducing your carbon emissions by somewhere between 70 and 80%. But the benefits that a lot of people don't see or realize that are going to be there, they realize those after the work is done. They suddenly find that they have a much more comfortable home. It's much more consistently comfortable. There's no kind of trying to think ahead, the heating on an hour before you get home so that you don't freeze as soon as you walk in the door. The house is going to be maintained consistently, comfortably, and properly ventilated. So when we do an energy retrofit on a home, we also address air tightness because you can insulate really well, but if it's full of holes, you're still going to be losing that heat. So we also address air tightness, and we address mechanical ventilation. We put in mechanical ventilation so that when you do go more airtight, you still have a very healthy indoor environment. So a lot of people report things like, you know, less illness, less colds and flus through the winter. They say that they're comfortable all of the time. You have people who kind of suddenly actually realize, and I found this when I did the energy upgrade in my own home, I had a lot more usable space. Because
I was going to say, you often have like a cold room or, you know, in an older house. Yeah.
Exactly. We had a couple of cold rooms, and that only got heated when absolutely necessary, and the rest of the time they remained cold. And for that, you know, as a result, they got minimal use. Whereas now the whole house is comfortable all of the time, and it feels like it's better than building an extension, and certainly cheaper. You've got more usable, comfortable space in the house after you go through that process and improve the entire house.
Brilliant.